Take you live to City Hall now. Olivia Chow, Mayor Chow is standing up there as we've just heard from the city manager outlining potential remedies for Toronto's budget deficit. So listen as Mayor Chow talks and gives her side of what she's expecting.
People are frustrated and people are feeling the impact of our budget challenge every day. In my daily travel, I see it myself. I experience it. I experience it while I'm biking over those potholes. It's teeth challenge, you know, it's occasionally really unnerving. I also see the impact of these potholes on pedestrians. The other day I saw a woman almost fell after stepping into a pothole trying to run for a streetcar on Spadina. Or refugees sleeping in churches, really looking for a place to stay. People in Scarborough stuck on a bus, waiting, or taking the long route because there's no other choices. People in Ferry Dock, and I experienced it, crammed, trying to get over to the beautiful Toronto Islands. And I watched kids crying and family just sort of really feeling uncomfortable, lined up shoulder to shoulder, crammed. We in Toronto deserve, and all the residents deserve, a city where you can rely on the TTC, fast, reliable, and affordable, where you can find housing that is, again, affordable, where you can have public services that you can rely on, trees, parks, good school, libraries, community centers, a city where small businesses and communities can thrive. And we need to build that city together. But with an operating budget hole of $1.5 billion and of a $30 billion unfunded capital budget over 10 years, it's hard to move ahead. To build a city we deserve after years of delay, we need to face facts, including the fact that time and time again, the city has been asked to step up and fund for things that are responsibility of other levels of government. I live in a semi-detached home, and I just imagine this. Imagine a city like your own home. All of a sudden, you've been asked, your next door neighbor homes, if their roof leaks, you have to pay for it. Their electricity, you pay for it. Everything, you pay for it. You don't get any of the rent. And then all of a sudden, you're asked to take care of the homes across the street without the funding, without the rent. If they need an addition, you pay for it. If they need to fix anything, you pay for it. That's just not fair. And it's just, that doesn't make sense. With today's recommendations, the Executive Committee and City Council review all of those recommendations that the staff have laid out very carefully, very comprehensively. It has been coming in months and years, is now coming in front of us. We have to face the fact and the reality. And we will step up. Toronto City Council will step up and do our part. But guess what? Even if we do all of those things, and some of those are really hard to stomach, it's cover about 30% of what we need. There's this huge gap, 60%. It's like your neighbor's houses that you have to take care of. You have to negotiate a deal. Just like us, we have to negotiate a deal with both the provincial and the federal government. So we're asking them to step up, work with us, so that we could grow our economy, so that we have a city that is strong. Because having a vibrant and affordable city means a strong Ontario, a strong Canada. And Toronto residents deserve that. It's time for other orders of government to join us to build the kind of city we all deserve. And we do know that together we are stronger. Joining me here today, of course, is Budget Chief Shirley Carroll, Deputy Mayor Jennifer McAuliffe. Budget Chief will talk about budget, and our Deputy Mayor will talk about our negotiation with other levels of government.
Thank you so much, Mayor Chow. And I want to thank Mayor Chow for not hesitating to bring forward this report. It's been a long time coming. Council asked for this right at the beginning of our term of office. What we saw in March from staff is a menu of these are things we should look at, direct us to look at them and bring you back all the options. And so in releasing the report today, we are, as the mayor has said so many times, this is the city stepping up. If residents say you have to step up and look at everything in your own books, we have. Many of those actions have already been taken. There are some more we can take, and those are on the table. Certainly, they'll be necessary to balance the immediate 2024 budget, but this is the long-term financial plan. This is about finally making the city of Toronto a big city like any other in the world. Any other city in the world of 3 million goes beyond property tax to those things that can really, really deliver the city that is needed. And so the menu is before us. Those things that are available to us right now through the City of Toronto Act, those things that may not be available, but which we've got to talk to the federal and provincial government about. It is as much in their interest to have this city succeed. We're long on the record of spelling that out for folks. We are delivering a lot of what they need delivered right now. For every new Canadian who starts their journey here in this country, most of them started here in Toronto. So we know we have to be a city that succeeds for them. We have to be able to sustain all the services that make that possible. And so what you see before you in a menu that will be before the executive and then council on September 6th are what would be the impacts of all of those things. Things like, things such as a graduated land transfer tax, so that, you know, a house that's more than $10 million, that's obviously a person who succeeds because they do their business in the city of Toronto. And so that's the sort of person that we really want to be investing in the city. And you'll see things like looking at our vacant home tax. It's in the middle of implementation. Did we get that amount right? Can we look at it again? But you will also see things that we've talked about many times before. Access to income, access to those revenue tools that do grow with the economy, because we have to consider those now more than ever. We're in hard economic times right now, but even in a moderate economy, having access to those tools allows us to be able to be prudent and balance out the city's finances. But in a boom time, or at a special time, I spoke this morning with a member of the media about what about when Taylor Swift comes to town for 6 days and fills up every hotel bed and every restaurant? The city doesn't see one dime of that. We're just glad it's happening. It means we have a successful city, and yet we won't gain anything out of that that can be invested back into the city, that can make sure that everyone benefits from that economic lift that comes during that time. And so we now look to other cities. It's all in the deep detail of this report that do have access to those things. Places like New York and Chicago, Houston, Baltimore, all of these places, since shortly after the Depression, have had access to income in some way, shape, or form, whether it be an actual direct income tax delivered to them or having a municipal sales tax. That's why those things are in the report, because we know there are world examples where that is why they are not constantly having a crisis conversation with their other government partners. They have a real collaboration and partnership through those tools. And that's why the long-term financial plan contemplates all of these. That being said, I'm going to hand it over to the Deputy Mayor. What we want is a fair deal that represents them stepping up to help us pay for the services that we deliver on their behalf, but also asking them to deliver powers and permissions, because we know they're struggling with the economy as well. And Deputy Mayor McKelvey had the job of taking care of intergovernmental affairs until Mayor Chow could be here. So she has insights for us this morning as well.
Well, thank you so very much, Budget Chief Carroll. Sounds nice to say that. It is also a delight to be here alongside Mayor Olivia Chow, who, as you just heard, stated very eloquently that the City of Toronto is facing an unprecedented financial crisis, and all levels of government must step up. We cannot tax our way out of this structural deficit. And the revenue tools currently available to us will not fill the void alone. It is not sustainable to continue using property taxes to fund provincial and federal responsibilities. We know that Toronto is Canada's economic engine. And as you heard from Mayor Chow, a strong Toronto creates a strong Ontario and a strong Canada. And while the Toronto region contributes more than 20% of Canada's GDP and 53% of Ontario's, Toronto receives limited funding from the provincial and the federal governments. Just 1.3% of the province's annual spending supports our City of Toronto services, and just 0.3% of the federal government spending is dedicated to the City of Toronto. It is important that discussions around funding for childcare, long-term care, and refugees continue. We must continue to advocate for a new fiscal framework for Toronto, and now we are seeing municipalities across the country coming together to advocate for that change. As such, next week, the Executive Committee will also consider requesting the Province of Ontario authorize new revenue tools, including those that are tied to economic growth, something that Budget Chief Carroll has been advocating for a very long time. And these include a municipal sales tax so that we can continue to provide the important services that our City of Toronto residents rely on. In the absence of a new funding model, the city will be faced with a reduction in essential service levels and the cancellation of capital projects that benefit the region, that benefit the province, and benefit the country. We must continue to have important conversations with our provincial and our federal partners so that we can ensure we can continue to move forward together in a sustainable way with our shared priorities, including housing, transit, refugee response, and climate action. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today, and I will pass it back to Mayor Chow for questions.
Thank you. Well said. Some of you may have some questions.
So, Mayor Chow, Phil Perkins with CB24. It seems like you're on the same page as the city manager. You held up the slides. They talked about, in the absence of more provincial federal help, a growing increase in property taxes. He just needs a number from you so they can start making this plan going forward for the next 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. So is there a starting point on what property taxes could start at in terms of the increases and what they can go up to?
Mm-hmm. You heard from both Deputy Mayor and the Budget Chief said that you can't tax a way out of this budget hole. 1% tax is $38 million, maybe 39 with inflation, okay? $1 million a year. So it's just, there's not enough. If it's $1.5 billion operating budget hole. So even if we look at all of these revenue tools, we still don't have enough. And I looked through every single of the revenue tools that had been recommended. You know, it's not going to be enough. So that's why we're here saying, we'll do our part. But other levels of government have to step up.
Which this report again reiterates the need for the other governments to provide funding, but also contemplates stopping the expansion of long-term care home beds and is pausing negotiations over new transit projects. So is this the city taking a different approach now? Is it playing hardball with the other levels of government?
It's painful because we need that 1,000 beds in long-term care. We know because there's a huge waiting list for people to get into long-term care. The City of Toronto operates 10 long-term care buildings homes. And if you look at during the pandemic, it's the safest place of all the private ones, nonprofit ones, and city ones. City ones in terms of the number of people that are sick and seniors that have unfortunately passed away because of COVID, we have the lowest number. Best run. So we want to do more. We can do more. But this report said we're already $6 million short. Health is federal and provincial. We're willing to do it. We've been doing it. But how are we going to do more? How are we going to expand? Because the existing 10 homes is already running a deficit of $6 million because we are looking at 394 positions. And TDC, we need to build that Eglinton LRT East. We need to do it yesterday. But right now, the existing line 2, those subways cars on Bloor, we need new ones. We got new ones with the federal government through their gas tax quite a few years ago. We need new ones because their lifespan is coming, those subway cars, the lifespan is coming on soon. We don't want a case where the SRT, the Scarborough RT, was over their existing lifespan by 10 years. So we need to do the, quote, state of good repair, i.e. replacing what we have, make sure the subway runs and the system is good. And we love to expand. But we need to have a new deal with the provincial government. It's not just the capital cost. We could build any number of things, but after you build it, we still need to have the money to operate it. So that's why it's on the table.
Let's go back to the long-term care beds because let's.
Okay, we're listening in as the mayor, deputy mayor, and budget chief of the City of Toronto talk about basically making a pitch to the other levels of government, i.e. the feds and province, about a new sort of financial deal, financial structure or arrangement for the City of Toronto to try to work on that $1 billion deficit, not just for now, but going forward in the future. Back live to City Hall, where Mayor Chow continues to respond to the options for helping bridge the city's not only funding gap for now, but also going long-term into the future. Let's listen live again.
That was downloaded to us. Ontario Housing. It's called Ontario Housing. Jane and Finch and all that. It used to belong to the Ontario government. That's why it's called Ontario Housing. That was downloaded. And the tragedy of that was they downloaded it without a reserve funds. Whereas the City of Toronto at the time had the City Home. We also had the Metro Toronto Housing Authority Corporation with seniors. We had a healthy reserve funds for both of all those housing, for the housing that we used to have, right? We still have them. But when the Ontario government downloaded the Ontario Housing to the City of Toronto, no reserve fund. Guess what? When the elevator doesn't work, when the structures start to deteriorate, who pays for it? Not the Ontario government, the City of Toronto. Is that fair? No. So we're saying that, folks, you've done it time and time and time again. You need to stop. We need to have a new fiscal framework. Step up. Let's do this together. We will work together. And when we grow and when we are strong, then Ontario and Canada will be even stronger.
So part of the fix is the municipal tax. McKelvey talked about, so did Paul Johnson. What would that municipal sale tax look like in terms of value? How will that affect taxpayers?
Well, people pay an HST right now. They pay 13 cents on the dollar. There was a time when they paid 15 cents on the dollar. And the premier, or the prime minister of the day, I should say, Stephen Harper, took 2 cents away. But taking that 2 cents away made really no difference in the economy. Giving it to individuals didn't cause everyone to run out and buy a car or a washer and a dryer. It was a small change. But if you want to apply it to the sustainability of a city, 1 cent on the dollar, if you went back to that 14 cents, went to 1 cent on the dollar, in a moderate income such as we have today, that's $800 million a year. But coming from the people who can afford it, Because if you don't spend any money, you don't pay that tax. If you spend a lot of money, you pay more of that tax. That's why it's the most fair way. You can't do that with property tax. Property tax isn't based on wealth. It's why we've reached the point where we can no longer just rely on it. But that 1 cent on the dollar, imagine the change that it would make if you had $800 to $1 billion of new money a year.
Okay, we will continue
Suddenly,
listening live to
that
this
transit
throughout the
system-
afternoon here on CP24. That is the Budget Chief, Shelley Carroll, along with Mayor Olivia Chow and Deputy Mayor McKelvey, talking about Toronto's massive budget gap and some potential solutions or long-term remedies to this. This conversation continues coming up on Live at Noon.